Welcome to the next episode of the Default Profitable podcast. You're listening to stories about business owners in the Indianapolis area for business owners in the Indianapolis area. Today, we're going to be talking about what it takes to start, run, and grow a specialty business. Talk about some successes, some failures, some lessons from a real business owner. I'm your host, Matt Nettleton. Today is my guest, Amanda Starr. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm happy to have you. Listen, we've just met, but why don't you take the first 2 or 3 minutes and introduce yourself and your company?
So my name is Amanda Starr. I own Arise Safety and CPR. We are a full-service CPR and First Aid training company. We help companies stay OSHA compliant. We also do offer classes to the public that anyone can sign up for, especially teachers. We do a lot of healthcare workers, parents who are just wanting to get certified to learn how to help take care of their kids. But yeah, we pretty simple. We just do a whole lot of training.
So when did you actually start the business?
So we actually opened the business in September of 2021.
So why did you start the business? Let's start there.
Okay, prior to starting the business, I had worked for another CPR company, and I had worked for them for several years. Prior to that, I worked in the medical field, and I worked in the medical field for about 10 years, and then became a part-time CPR instructor. But I essentially started it right after COVID, when everyone was getting laid off. And what I saw was a lot of my coworkers at that time were going off and they were starting their own businesses and doing CPR training, not necessarily in Indiana, a lot from Kentucky and Ohio. And so I saw how they were being successful and I wanted to do the same thing. So I reached out to a close friend of mine who's based out of Cincinnati and I said, "Hey, show me what you're doing. Teach me what you're doing." And he did. So even today, we do a lot of collaborations in our business. We work together a lot. He's actually just gone nationwide with his company, and we're statewide. And now we have 5 employees plus myself.
What's that like?
Oh man. Definitely a challenge. I never really worked a whole lot in management, so it's been a challenge, but I think being the owner of the company, I have a unique opportunity. I'm not just their manager. I'm also a lot of different things. I play a lot of different roles, and I think that brings a really unique relationship when it comes to employees because you really get to know their families and what their hobbies are. And I think one of the coolest things about being a business owner, I think one of my favorite things is when I'm writing those paychecks, I get to think about, wow, this person is getting this check and it's going to go towards their son's first car or their daughter's college tuition or anything like that. And that brings a lot of joy to me to be able to know that this company is providing that to people.
Yeah, well, it probably the number one thing that business owners have talked about on the podcast from a satisfaction is not the money they make. It's the people.
Yeah.
It is the people. So we're in COVID. You see coworkers going off and starting businesses, and you get ready to start yours. You were smart enough to call somebody who had already done it, right?
Mm-hmm.
How much of a plan did you start with?
Oh, I had an understanding of how the industry works, barely. I thought I had an understanding. He did set me down and we had somewhat of a plan. Like he gave me his plan and then I kind of based mine off of that a little bit. But it definitely, what I had set out to do that day is nowhere near where we are today. But I did have somewhat of a baseline of where I wanted to go, what my goals were. But they changed. I think I do better now today, planning for the next year. Like, what do we want? Where are we going? But I definitely did not have a clear view in that first year.
And so you didn't necessarily, you had an idea, but you didn't go through a planning process where you came up with a 20-page document. You just kind of said, I think I know how this works, and you went for it.
Right. Yeah.
And
Like it was all in my head. It was all in my
and
head.
I got to be honest with you, that's a majority of people do it that way,
Yeah.
and they end up doing fine. So it's not a bad thing. Um, when you think about the industry, or when you think about your company, typically people start for one of two reasons. The first reason is they have this great passion and they're going to bring this product or service to the world. The second is they see this economic opportunity and they're like, I can do this and make money. And those are kind of the two ends of the spectrum. Which end do you think you kind of started on?
Definitely the passion side. I mean, obviously, I wanted to be a little bit more independent, make more money than what I was making. But I don't think this is the type of job or business you can own and not have a passion for it. Um, but I definitely a passion. So my best friend, shortly after I got my CPR certification and I started learning about, more in depth about cardiac arrest and all the things that go with it. My best friend actually had a heart attack and went into cardiac arrest at work. And I remember sitting there in the parking lot of the hospital and I couldn't bring myself to walk in because I know what the statistics are. And it's very sad and it's very depressing because less than 10% of people who go into cardiac arrest survive, especially if it's outside of a hospital. And she was at work and but she did survive. She did survive. Her coworkers performed CPR on her, and she's actually working with me today, helping people teach CPR. And it was those things, and seeing my best friend, my mom had a stroke, and my son was able to see the signs and symptoms and able to get her help and save her life. And then hearing stories from students about how this type of training have saved their lives or saved their loved one's life. And that's where the real passion started coming from. I don't think I started on day one as a CPR instructor and was like, this is my passion, but seeing how the positive effects on the community have, that's where the real love. And it just deepens. Every story I hear, it deepens the love for what I do.
And so how many so I think I asked this, but how many people do you think you've trained?
Total thousands. I mean, you're probably looking hundreds of thousands of people all over the state of Indiana, some in Ohio, a few in Illinois, Kentucky.
And do you have any idea how many people they've saved? That would be kind of a neat thing to know.
It would be, and I can't, and I don't. A lot of times I don't. Unfortunately, I don't ever hear from the majority of them. But I do hear stories all day long, especially when it comes to a lot of the first aid stuff.
Yeah,
They people were able to recognize that their mom was having issues and whether it just be a dizzy spell or finding out what these symptoms are before it turns into a problem. So that
right.
preventative part of it is a lot of where we like to focus as well.
All right. So if you could think back to 2 years ago when you started, now you've added 5 employees. But what do you wish you had known 2 years ago that would have made your life easier?
I wish I had a better understanding of finances and how money worked. Like you think the money just comes in and then there's not a simple budget. It's a whole nother world. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into when I started this. And I think the other thing that I wish somebody would have told me was how many ups and downs it is to deal with both emotionally and mentally. Like nobody talks about the emotional and the mental part of starting and owning a business. And in that first year it feels like you're riding a roller coaster because every every downfall you feel like it's the end of it, and every success you feel like you're on top of the world. And I think eventually you get to where you're like, okay, we're all going to have our ups and downs, but it took me a long time to get to realize like this is just another day, the next deal will come. But nobody ever told me about the emotional aspect of owning a business.
So it's how did you or how are you overcoming the financial literacy piece? Because that's been the number one that so people have come to us and when we start asking questions, if you listen back to 80 episodes, number one is people say, I wish I understood money better. Even people that had finance degrees, and it's like your home finances and your business finances, two different worlds. Right. So how have you overcome that? What have you done over the past two
Oh
years to
yeah.
get better?
I work with a lot of different mentors, a lot of different people. I ask a lot of questions. I have a financial advisor, I have a tax person, I have a bookkeeper, all these different people that I can go to and ask questions. Other business owners. I think one of the most important things I did in the beginning was find my resources. Like where's my go-to places going to be? And I've just surrounded myself with people who were willing to answer those questions for me.
That's good advice to find people. And then I guess you talked about the money side of it and how are you managing the emotional side of it? Because that's an up and down thing.
It definitely is. I have, spirituality is is kind of where I is my go to. I try to find time for myself in the mornings. I like to go do yoga to have that break throughout the week, just to help regulate myself. Those are some of the things that have worked for me, and I read a lot of spiritual books and try to just stay connected in that area. And it's amazing how if I'm feeling well spiritually, that I'm doing well in business. And it's just funny how that's really correlated and worked for me as a business owner.
Yeah. So obviously, I mean, you worked for other people for a long time.
Hmm.
And at some point you decided to go off on your own. I'm sure some of your friends have said, why would you do this? Why would you go off on your own? How do you tell them what's the advantage of being self-employed? Why would you do that instead of the certainty of a paycheck and
Well, yeah, it definitely is not the freedom, especially in those first years. I think I wanted to say, well, I'll have more time. I'll have the freedom to do what I want, and that's absolutely 100% not the case. And I was very delusional in believing that. But I talked about that, and I'm not sure that I could really truly pinpoint what it is, but there is definitely a reward to being a business owner. Kind of like I talked about with the paychecks and seeing, I'm part of something that's a little bit bigger than I am, and I get to bring other people to be a part of that, and together we get to help people save lives. And I can't put into words exactly what that is or what that means, but I do feel like we're making a positive impact on our community, and I think that's what gives me the drive. And now that we are in our going into our third year as a business, I am starting to see some of those freedoms, where I can take time off work if I need it or whatnot. And financially, it's getting better. Those first years are always hard. Like it's definitely not. You're not rolling in the dough when you're
you're
when
not one
you're
of those rich business owners?
no, not yet, not yet. I said, give me a few more years.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work like that. It just doesn't. But there's definitely you got to have a passion for whatever it is you do, and I don't think if I had that deep seated passion for what I was doing, there's no way that I would continue the day to day stuff.
Yeah. So if 2024 Amanda could go back and talk to 2022 Amanda the night before you opened the business, and 2024 Amanda says, okay, listen, it'll all work out. You'll be fine. But here's what you need to focus on first. What would that be?
I think first and foremost, what I would have done is I would have studied more existing businesses in my field, what they were doing, what works for them. The way that I took it, I looked into a lot of businesses in general, and I kind of took what they were doing and tried to create my own. And I was about a year or so into it when I was like, wow, there's a lot of specialty stuff that would help my business run a lot smoother. And so I think I would have definitely studied more existing businesses that have been in business for more than a year, several years, and have a lot more tips and tricks.
All right. Is there any other, what other wisdom? Because you're relatively new on the journey. Like you didn't come from management. You don't, I mean, you just kind of got up and went, which is awesome. But
Yeah.
what other messages could you give to somebody that's in your position that you were in 2 to 3 years ago before you started?
Again, I would say get a mentor. Find your people that will help you. One of the big things that I did was I got into the networking scene, and I found some networking groups that I really worked well with. For me, as a woman-owned business, I tried to seek out other woman-owned companies. The other big thing that I did was I joined the local chamber. The local chamber of commerce has been really good to me. The investment has been well worth having access to the resources. SCORE has been huge. They have so many resources and anything that you could possibly want to know. There's a webinar on it, and they're just now starting to getting back to having live trainings or educational. I'm not sure what they call it.
So expand on that for a second. So when did you start working with SCORE?
I started working with SCORE probably about 6 months into being a business owner.
So just to make that clear to everybody, SCORE is not just a resource before you start.
Yeah,
SCORE will help you once you've started and as you're running.
absolutely. Yeah, I still meet with my mentor, my SCORE mentor, about every couple months or so, and I see him around a lot when I go to networking groups. Another big thing I did is I took a lot of courses, a lot of free trainings. The Indie Chamber, the Business Ownership Initiative, has a really good beginners course that it's completely free, and it will break down step by step what you need to know when starting a business. They've got a lot of resources. The Small Business Association has a lot of really great resources. Um, there's just so many. There's so many resources out there. I think the biggest struggle I had was knowing where to find them. Last summer I did a Leadership Indianapolis course that I was able to get a grant for, and that brought in a lot of contacts, a lot of different resources and a lot of opportunities just to grow.
Yeah, I think the big thing that I'm hearing you say, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but you did this yourself, but you didn't do it alone.
Right.
There are people like, and that's kind of one of the messages I want people to get from all these podcasts is that there's resources. People want you to make it.
They do. They really do. They do.
Yes. Yeah. So, all right. Well, that's I think that's a good place to kind of wrap up. I mean, you've got a business that's rapidly growing. You're teaching CPR to hundreds of people. You know you've saved some people's lives. You have great passion because you know it works. I mean, and you've managed to uncover resources to help you, even though you kind of lack the background that I think people worry about. Oh, I was never in management, or I don't know how to do this, right? Listen, there's all kinds of resources. People want to help you. If you want to
Absolutely.
start a business, pick up the phone.
And I think sometimes that having the lack of background has been more of an advantage to me than it has been a disadvantage, because I'm not set in any ways. I'm not set, well, this is how it was done then. This is how I got to do it now. Like, I'm walking in with an open, fresh mind, like, teach me, show me what to do. And as a business owner, I have options.
Yeah, and the beautiful part is you got 5 people who trust you enough to tie their future to yours. So that's great.
Absolutely. It's been wonderful.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, I'm going to remind everybody there's going to be more information about Amanda and her company in the show notes over at Default Profitable. And there's 3 ways you can help us grow the podcast. Subscribe wherever you listen, hit the reviews, and give us stars if you can't give us words. wherever you listen. And then finally, you hear something interesting, share the episode with somebody else. Amanda, thanks for being a guest.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. I enjoyed it. And for our listeners, thanks for showing up. We'll be back next week with another episode of Default Profitable. Till then, stay focused, keep working, stay profitable.